I never thought moving to Oakridge Estates would turn me into an unwitting participant in a federal investigation, but life has a way of surprising you. It started with a strange pattern I noticed within my first month of living there. Packages would mysteriously disappear from porches across our immaculate community. Not every day, not every house, but frequently enough that neighbors had started whispering about it at community barbecues and pool gatherings. The homeowners association insisted it was outsiders sneaking in during delivery hours, but something about that explanation never sat right with me. Maybe it was my training, or maybe it was just intuition. But I had my suspicions, especially about Meredith Wilcox, our ever-vigilant homeowners association board secretary, who seemed to know everything about everyone in our gated community. It was a crisp autumn morning when I first encountered Meredith in person. I had just moved in 3 days earlier and was still unpacking boxes when my doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was a slender woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair, designer sunglasses perched on top of her head, and a clipboard clutched to her chest. "Welcome to Oakridge Estates," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm Meredith Wilcox, Homeowners Association Secretary and Neighborhood Welcome Committee." She thrust a thick binder into my hands, the community guidelines, and informed me that I had exactly 14 days to correct the non-regulation mailbox the previous owners had installed. Before I could even respond, she was already eyeing the delivery package sitting beside my door with obvious disapproval. "You really should bring those inside immediately," she advised with a thinly veiled command in her tone. "We have had issues with theft in the area. Outside elements, you understand." With that cryptic warning, she pivoted on her designer heels and strode to the next house on her list. You see, before moving to Oakridge, I had spent the last 8 years working as a data analyst for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My job typically involved sitting behind a desk, combing through digital evidence and identifying patterns that field agents might miss. It was fascinating work but rarely put me in the middle of active cases. That changed when my department began tracking a sophisticated ring of package thieves operating across several affluent neighborhoods in our metropolitan area. The thieves were smart. They avoided security cameras, struck inconsistently, and somehow always knew which packages contained valuable items. When my husband and I decided to relocate to be closer to his aging parents, I had no idea our new home would intersect with my professional life in such a dramatic way. My husband, Ryan, is a software developer who works remotely, which gave us flexibility in choosing where to live. His parents had both experienced health scares in the previous year, his father with a mild heart attack and his mother with early-stage Parkinson's disease. They lived in a retirement community about 20 minutes from Oakridge Estates, and we wanted to be close enough to help with doctoral appointments and daily needs without being directly in their space. When we found a charming 4-bedroom colonial in Oakridge with a home office space for each of us, it seemed perfect. The community had immaculately maintained grounds, a community pool, and tennis courts, and was conveniently located near both the elder care facility and my office downtown. The hefty homeowners association fees were a bit daunting, but the amenities and security seemed worth it, or so we thought. Our first few weeks in the neighborhood were pleasant enough. Neighbors brought welcome baskets and invitations to backyard get-togethers. Everyone seemed friendly on the surface, but I soon noticed an undercurrent of tension. At one weekend barbecue, I overheard 2 women discussing a neighbor who had received a violation notice for leaving his garbage bin visible from the street for more than 8 hours after collection. "Third notice this month," one whispered. "Meredith has it out for him ever since he questioned her about the landscaping budget at the annual meeting." The other nodded knowingly. "You know how she gets when anyone challenges her authority." It was my first glimpse into the power dynamics at play in our seemingly idyllic community. During my first homeowners association meeting, I noticed how Meredith dominated the conversation. A woman in her 50s with immaculately highlighted hair and a perpetual Lululemon wardrobe, she seemed obsessed with what she called neighborhood standards. She complained about everything from improper garbage bin placement to, most notably, packages left carelessly on front porches. "They attract thieves and ruin our curb appeal," she declared, pointing at a PowerPoint slide displaying a porch with several Amazon deliveries. I have documented 17 instances of parcels sitting unattended for more than 3 hours last month alone. The specificity of her monitoring struck me as odd. No one had time to track package deliveries so meticulously unless, of course, they had an ulterior motive. The meeting dragged on for nearly 3 hours as Meredith presented detailed reports on violation notices, landscaping schedules, and a proposed increase in quarterly dues to fund enhanced community aesthetics. I observed the dynamics at play, the weary resignation of longtime residents, the nervous compliance of newer homeowners, and the almost regal authority Meredith wielded despite technically being just one board member among 5. The Homeowners Association president, a retired investment banker named Gerald, seemed content to let Meredith run the show while he occasionally nodded in agreement. The other board members contributed little, deferring to her on almost every issue. It was clear who truly controlled Oakridge Estates. After the meeting, I lingered in the community clubhouse, chatting with a few neighbors. Eleanor, a retired elementary school teacher who had lived in the community for over 15 years, offered some unsolicited advice. "If you want a peaceful life here, dear, just stay on Meredith's good side," she whispered, glancing around to ensure we weren't overheard. "She has an uncanny knack for making life difficult for those who cross her." Last year, the Hendersons questioned the pool renovation budget, and suddenly they were receiving violation notices for everything from improper holiday decorations to an unapproved shade of white on their trim. Eleanor chuckled without humor. "They moved out within 6 months, said they couldn't take the stress anymore." On my way home, I found myself thinking about Eleanor's warning and connecting it with my professional training. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has profiling techniques for identifying individuals who exploit positions of power for personal gain. Meredith checked several concerning boxes: a need for control, meticulous record-keeping of others' activities, strategic intimidation of those who questioned her authority, and an unusual interest in others' possessions. While this didn't prove she was our package thief, it certainly made her a person of interest in my mind. After the 3rd package disappeared from my street in 2 weeks, I decided to mention the pattern to my supervisor. Initially, he seemed only mildly interested until I described Meredith's unusual behavior and her comprehensive knowledge of delivery schedules. She drives around the neighborhood during peak delivery hours in her white Lexus sport utility vehicle, I explained. She calls it her community patrol, but neighbors say she's been doing it for years, ever since she became secretary. When I mentioned that the Homeowners Association had repeatedly blocked proposals for community security cameras, citing aesthetic concerns, my supervisor's interest visibly deepened. "For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much." 2 days later, he called me into his office and asked if I would be willing to assist in an operation from my own home. Special Agent Christopher Martinez was a 20-year veteran of the Federal Bureau of Investigation with a reputation for creative problem-solving in difficult cases. He was tall and lean with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. When I entered his office that morning, he gestured for me to close the door, a sign that whatever he was about to discuss required discretion. "I've been reviewing your notes on the Oakridge situation," he began, sliding a folder across his desk. "The pattern matches 3 other communities in our jurisdiction where package thefts have spiked over the past 18 months. I opened the folder to find reports from affluent neighborhoods similar to mine, all with active homeowners associations. All with significant increases in package thefts, and all with surprisingly little action taken by community leadership to address the problem. We've been trying to crack this case for months," Agent Martinez continued, pulling up a digital map on his monitor. Red pins marked theft locations across the metropolitan area. "We initially thought it might be an organized ring targeting wealthy neighborhoods, but the patterns are too inconsistent for professional thieves. They're too selective, too cautious. And here's the interesting part, when we install cameras at community entrances, the thefts stop completely." He leaned forward, tapping his desk for emphasis. "It's someone inside these communities, Someone who knows when security measures change, someone who has legitimate access and doesn't trigger suspicion. His implication was clear. Meredith fit the profile perfectly. Agent Martinez explained that the Bureau had been planning a sting operation in another neighborhood, but my information about Meredith presented a more promising opportunity. "Your background gives you the perfect cover," he said. "No one would suspect that the quiet new neighbor works for us, and your house's location on a corner lot provides excellent sightlines for surveillance." He outlined a preliminary plan that would use my home as bait to catch our thief in the act. The operation would require careful coordination, specialized equipment, and my full cooperation. It was far beyond my usual analytical role, but I found myself unexpectedly eager to participate. After years of examining data after the fact, the chance to be part of an active investigation, to help catch a criminal red-handed, was exhilarating. The plan was elegantly simple. The Bureau would prepare a decoy package equipped with a global positioning system tracker and a specialized forensic dye pack that would activate when moved. I would place it on my front porch and leave it there, apparently unattended, for an extended period. Meanwhile, a surveillance team would monitor from an unmarked van positioned discreetly at the corner of our street. My home security system, which I had installed despite the Homeowners Association's objections, would provide additional video evidence. "All you need to do is act normal and wait," Agent Martinez cautioned. "Remember, you are still undercover in your community. Even if we make an arrest, your involvement remains classified." I understood completely. My neighbors would never know that the quiet woman who brought homemade cookies to community events was actually helping the Federal Bureau of Investigation catch a thief. The operation began on a Tuesday morning. I placed the package, designed to look like an expensive electronics delivery, on my porch at precisely 7:30 a.m., just as the morning rush of people leaving for work began. Then I pulled my car out of the garage and drove away, making it appear as though I had left for the day. In reality, I parked a few blocks over and walked back through a neighbor's yard to slip in through my back door. From my home office window, I had a perfect view of both my front porch and the street beyond. The surveillance van was in position, disguised as a landscape maintenance vehicle, complete with magnetic signs and equipment in the back. Now we just had to wait and see if our theory was correct. The decoy package itself was a marvel of Federal Bureau of Investigation engineering. From the outside, it looked exactly like a standard delivery from a high-end electronics retailer, right down to the authentic shipping label and branded tape. Inside, however, was a sophisticated tracking device with multiple capabilities. First, it contained a global positioning system unit that would activate once the package was moved, allowing agents to track its location in real time with pinpoint accuracy. Second, it held a specially designed dye pack, similar to those used by banks but far more advanced. The forensic dye was invisible to the naked eye but would transfer to anything it touched, hands, clothing, surfaces, and would remain detectable under ultraviolet light for up to 72 hours, even after washing. The dye was formulated to be unique to this operation, with chemical markers that would definitively link whoever handled the package to the theft. Finally, the device included a motion-activated camera capable of capturing images in low light. It was the kind of technology typically reserved for major operations, and its deployment in our suburban porch piracy case spoke to how seriously the Bureau was taking these thefts. I settled into my makeshift surveillance position with a thermos of coffee and a direct line to the team via a nearly invisible earpiece. Agent Martinez had instructed me to maintain normal household routines that could be visible through windows, moving between rooms, occasionally turning lights on and off to avoid arousing suspicion from any observant neighbors. Remember, he had cautioned during our final briefing, Meredith has survived this long by being perceptive. She'll be watching for anything unusual. I followed his advice, periodically moving away from my observation point to water plants or adjust blinds in other rooms before returning to my post. The surveillance team in the van would alert me if anything happened during these brief absences. For the first 2 hours, our street remained quiet except for the occasional dog walker or delivery truck. I was beginning to wonder if we had chosen the wrong day when my earpiece crackled to life. "Heads up," came the voice of Agent Ramirez, who was positioned in the surveillance van. Target vehicle approaching from the north entrance. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I quickly but calmly returned to my observation window. Sure enough, Meredith's white Lexus sport utility vehicle was turning onto our street, moving with deliberate slowness. Around 10:15 a.m., I spotted Meredith's white Lexus sport utility vehicle creeping down the street at an unusually slow pace. She was wearing large sunglasses despite the cloudy day, and her head turned methodically from side to side as she assessed each house she passed. When she reached mine, the vehicle slowed even further. I held my breath as she pulled over and parked 2 houses down. Through my earpiece, I heard the agent in the surveillance van confirm visual contact. Subject is exiting vehicle, approaching on foot. I watched as Meredith strolled casually past my house, then doubled back as if she had forgotten something. She glanced quickly in both directions before marching purposefully up my walkway. What happened next was both shocking and vindicating. With surprising agility for a woman in her 50s, Meredith hopped up my 3 porch steps, snatched the package, and tucked it under her arm in one fluid motion. She was off my property in less than 20 seconds, walking briskly back to her vehicle with the stolen parcel. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. Through my earpiece, I heard the team leader's calm voice. Target has taken the bait. Maintain positions. I watched as Meredith drove away, completely oblivious to the tiny device now transmitting her every movement to a team of federal agents. For someone who claimed to care so deeply about neighborhood security, she had just committed a federal offense in broad daylight without a moment's hesitation. The surveillance team followed at a safe distance as Meredith drove, not to her home, but to a storage facility 3 miles outside our community. This was unexpected. We had assumed she would take the stolen items to her house. Instead, she punched in a security code and disappeared inside for approximately 12 minutes before emerging empty-handed. When she finally returned to her home in Oakridge Estates, the team leader gave me the signal. Packages stationary at the storage location, we're moving to Phase 2. While one team continued to monitor Meredith, another obtained an emergency warrant for both her residence and the storage unit. By 3 p.m. that afternoon, everything was in place. I remained at home, maintaining my cover and awaiting updates. At precisely 4:17 p.m., as Meredith was preparing her afternoon tea according to her predictable schedule, federal agents knocked on her front door. From my window, I could see several neighbors peering curiously from behind their curtains as official vehicles lined our typically quiet street. Although I could not hear the conversation, I could clearly see Meredith's face transition from annoyed superiority to shocked disbelief as agents presented her with a warrant. When they escorted her back to her garage and the forensic team revealed the ultraviolet light evidence, her hands and car steering wheel were covered in the invisible dye from the package. Her expression changed again to something between panic and rage. What the search revealed was far more extensive than even I had anticipated. In Meredith's basement, agents discovered dozens of items still in their original packaging: electronic devices, jewelry, designer clothing, and even prescription medications. Most disturbing were the meticulous records she kept, a spreadsheet detailing each theft, including date, time, address, and estimated value of the items. She had been stealing from her neighbors for over 3 years, using her position on the Homeowners Association board to both facilitate her crimes and prevent security measures that might catch her. The storage unit was even worse. It contained hundreds of stolen items, many already prepared for resale on various online marketplaces under false identities. The Bureau granted me special clearance to view the evidence as it was catalogued, given my role in the operation. I was shocked by the sophistication of Meredith's system. Her basement had been converted into what investigators described as a processing center with different stations for different types of items. Electronics were tested, reset, and repackaged in generic boxes. Clothing and accessories had their tags removed and were photographed against professional backdrops for online listings. Prescription medications, perhaps the most concerning items, were sorted by type and stored in a small refrigerator with a digital lock. In a corner desk, agents found multiple fake identification cards, credit cards under different names, and a guide to creating untraceable online seller accounts. This was no opportunistic thief. This was a calculated criminal enterprise operating in plain sight within our community. The forensic team discovered something even more disturbing when they examined Meredith's computer. She had created detailed profiles of every household in Oakridge Estates, including work schedules, regular delivery days, vacation patterns, and even health information that might indicate valuable prescriptions being delivered. She had used her position as Homeowners Association Secretary to collect this data, requesting information under the guise of emergency contact procedures or community directory updates. Most neighbors had complied without question, never suspecting their personal details would be used to target them more effectively. She had even installed a police scanner app on her phone to monitor for any reports of theft in the area, allowing her to adjust her activities if law enforcement showed increased interest in the neighborhood. Agent Martinez allowed me to observe part of Meredith's interview from behind a one-way mirror at the field office. It was a surreal experience watching our perfectly polished Homeowners Association secretary, now dressed in a standard-issue jumpsuit, attempting to maintain her air of authority even in custody. The interviewing agents were skilled professionals who had dealt with much more hardened criminals, but even they seemed taken aback by Meredith's peculiar combination of entitlement and rationalization. "Those people were careless with their belongings," she insisted, her voice carrying the same condescending tone she used at Homeowners Association meetings. "I simply removed items that were security risks to teach a lesson about responsibility." When confronted with evidence of her online sales, she became indignant. "I provided a service to the community by removing unsecured items," she argued. "What I did with those items afterward is my private business." Meredith's interrogation revealed the disturbing psychology behind her actions. According to the lead investigator who debriefed me later, she genuinely believed she was entitled to take packages that were improperly secured or left negligently on porches. She had convinced herself that by stealing these items, she was teaching her neighbors a valuable lesson about responsibility and community standards. The fact that she profited significantly from these thefts, investigators estimated she had made over $70,000 selling stolen goods, was apparently secondary in her mind to the principle of the matter. It was a twisted logic that somehow allowed her to simultaneously steal from and lecture the very people she was stealing from about security. The next morning, as Meredith was being processed at the Federal Detention Center, news of her arrest spread through Oakridge Estates like wildfire. Local news vans parked at the community entrance, their reporters eagerly seeking comments from shocked residents. The story made the evening news with the headline, "Homeowners Association official caught in elaborate porch piracy sting." For obvious reasons, I declined all interview requests, but I could not help feeling a profound satisfaction as justice unfolded. My neighbors, many of whom had been victims of Meredith's thefts, gathered in small clusters throughout the day, sharing stories of missing packages and recalling how Meredith had often been the first to sympathize with their loss. The most ironic moment came that evening at an emergency Homeowners Association meeting called to address the situation and vote on Meredith's immediate removal from the board. The remaining members, clearly shaken by the scandal, unanimously approved a comprehensive security proposal that included community cameras at all entrances, the very same proposal Meredith had blocked repeatedly over the years. As the meeting concluded, the Homeowners Association president announced a community-wide effort to identify victims and help them file claims for restitution. "This has been a betrayal of the worst kind," he stated gravely. "Someone we trusted used her position to victimize the very people she claimed to protect." In the days that followed, federal prosecutors filed multiple charges against Meredith: mail theft, interstate trafficking of stolen goods, fraud, and identity theft, among them. The evidence was overwhelming, with the forensic dye providing irrefutable proof of the final theft and her own meticulous records documenting years of criminal activity. My role in the investigation remained confidential. To my neighbors, I was simply another resident shocked by the revelations about our homeowners association secretary. Only my husband, Ryan, knew the truth, and he took great pleasure in casually mentioning at neighborhood gatherings how fortunate it was that someone finally caught that awful woman. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. Perhaps the most satisfying development was watching my community transform in the wake of Meredith's arrest. Neighbors who had barely spoken before now checked in on each other's packages and organized a community watch program. The atmosphere of suspicion that had permeated Oakridge Estates gave way to one of mutual support and genuine connection. And in a development that would have infuriated Meredith more than anything, doorbell cameras and porch security systems became the must-have accessories for every home, no longer viewed as prying eyes, but as symbols of a community looking out for one another. As for me, my supervisor called it one of the cleanest operations he had seen in years. The case against Meredith was airtight, with no complications or procedural issues that might jeopardize prosecution. I returned to my regular analytical duties, though with a newfound appreciation for field work. Sometimes I wonder if Meredith ever realized the package that ended her criminal career came from the quiet analyst who always followed all the homeowners association rules to the letter. I doubt it. In her mind, she was too clever to be caught by someone like me. That underestimation was ultimately her downfall, believing she could spot a federal agent while never imagining one was already living right under her nose, documenting her every